A very warm welcome to everyone in Alphavalue Consulting webinar series Alpha Spark. We will try our best to ensure it will worth your time. My name is Sameer Verma, co-founder and director Alphavalue Consulting. I will take 2 to 3 minutes to highlight the background of today's discussion and then hand it over to my colleague Manish Srivastava, who is co-founder and director Alphavalue Consulting, who is going to moderate the entire interaction today. I believe we all know that in the past few months, businesses around the globe has been severely disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, companies have lost half of its sales where the cost is constant, which may force to corporate to plan and revamp entire cost structure and entire business model. However, today's remote working scenario has accelerated the footprints of software as a service SaaS model. Clients are still focusing to have more values at a less cost, and the companies need to segregate low values and high values activities and deploy their resources accordingly. So today we have privilege to have Gary Cokins with us, who will guide how enterprise performance management has evolved from being an accounting software in early 70s then to spreadsheets, now ERP in the cloud SaaS settings, which is setting new standard. Further, we opt in having the what all value adding activities can be adopted to meet the client's requirement to improve overall organization performance and deliver better and lasting results for all the stakeholders. So be well informed. Over to you, Manish.
Yeah, thank you, Sameer. So I am Manish Srivastava, co-founder and director, Alphavalue Consulting. Today we have with us Mr. Gary Cokins, who is an internationally recognized expert, a speaker and author in advanced cost management and performance improvement systems. He is the founder of analytics-based performance management LLC. Gary began his career with Deloitte Consulting and worked with KPMG and SAS Consulting. He has authored various books like Activity-Based Cost Management, Performance Management, and Predictive Business Analytics, and many more. So please welcome Gary Cokins, who is our special guest today in the very first edition of Alpha Sparks. Over to Gary.
Thank you, Manish and Sameer. It's a pleasure to basically present a brief presentation about enterprise and corporate performance management and analytics. And if people would like to read more, because this will be a short webinar, you can go to my website at www.garycokins.com, G-A-R-Y, C as in clock, O-K-I-N-S.com. And in the tabs, there are free downloads on many of the topics I'm going to discuss here. Just a little bit more on my background. My education was actually in operations research and industrial engineering at Cornell University. And then I did my MBA at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management in 1974. I am 71 years old, but I feel like I'm 41. I was raised in Chicago. I think careers have a lot more to do with luck and circumstances than being smart and competent. I had a lucky break. In 1988, KPMG struck an exclusive contract with Harvard Business School Robert S. Kaplan. And maybe many of you will recognize his name from the Kaplan and Norton Strategy Map and Balance Scorecard, which I'll talk a little bit about. But he did the pioneering work in activity-based costing. And early in my career, at age 27, I was a division controller in Milwaukee. And that's where I then went to Deloitte. But I got recruited to KPMG. I learned how to implement activity-based costing, which applies in probably 90% of organizations. Unfortunately, not many in India. That's a problem to talk about because there's just too much emphasis on external financial reporting for statutory in India, not enough on internal management accounting that line managers and executives need for insights and making better decisions. But the net result is I wrote a book that led to more books. And so my career then sort of became a trainer and educator. So what would you like me to talk about next, Manish?
So you had a fantastic career and a lot of the experience you had. And we would like to hear from you, like how the enterprise performance management adds value to the entire organization, like how it brings efficiency into the organization.
Yes, there's a lot of confusion and lack of consensus about what is corporate performance management or what is enterprise performance management, and they're synonymous. They're really the same thing. And people confuse it with performance management of the human resources and personnel function. You know, it's much broader. It's a much larger umbrella. And the good news is this: enterprise and corporate performance management are really not new methods that people have to learn about, but they are existing methods that many people who are listening are already familiar with. You've read about them. You may have actually implemented a few of them in your organizations. The problem is for those who have implemented them, and in a few minutes I'll go through all these methods because they're like gears in a machine. They're to be integrated. The problem is they're implemented in isolation of each other. So there's planning and budgeting people, part of the building. There's profit analysis, another part of the building. The risk management, other part of the building. Lean management process, other. You get a lot more power and synergy when you integrate these like the gears in a machine, and even more power when you embed analytics into these methods, analytics of all flavors, regression, correlation, clustering, segmentation. And I know some of the listeners, you took those courses in college in analytics and statistics. You just wanted a passing grade and get out of there. You know, well, sorry, it's here. But the good news, you don't need to get your textbooks out and refresh how to do that, but you do need skill sets in your organization that do have those capabilities. So Manish, would you like me to talk about what are the forces that have led interest in performance?
Sure. We want to listen from you, like what are the forces, as well as like basically what I understand, it is majorly like an integration that is more needed. The system does not have to work in solos, and they have to make an integration and then only it can work, right? So please talk on like what you're saying.
So the way I look at it is because these methods have been around for decades, some even before computers, why has there been interest in the last 5 or 6 years in this? I'll go through, I think, maybe 7 or 8 forces. The first one is strategy execution failure. Most executives are quite good at formulating the strategy, or they'll bring in a high-end consulting firm to help them. Their big frustration is failure to execute the strategy. And that's where basically strategy map, balanced scorecard, key performance indicators, come into play. Because once you have good measures, because what if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and you get what you measure, then you can align the behavior of the managers and employee teams with the executive team strategy. The second problem has to do with accountability. There's no place to hide. You will be measured, you will be monitored. Doesn't necessarily mean your job's at risk, but it could adversely affect your salary increases or being promoted to higher level jobs. Another reason is rapid decision making. In the past, you could test and learn and have meetings in conference rooms with your supervisor. Today, people are on the phone, go or no go, yes or no. They need to make a decision in almost near real time. Another reason is mistrust of the management accounting system. Most managers do not trust the accuracy of the costing information, like product costing or service line costing for service organizations. And the problem there is these overhead allocations. They know that, I'll just kind of be humorous, that the accountants are lazy. They say, oh, we'll take all this overhead, which is actually better termed indirect expense, and we'll just spread it like butter across bread, to do the product or service line costing using things like, labor hours or a number of units produced or sales amount or square feet or number of employees. None of those cost allocation factors reflect the unique consumption that those products and service lines consume of the work, the end-to-end processes and the work activities that belong to them, which in turn consume the expenses, salaries, supplies, purchases. So that's where activity-based costing comes in, because it resolves that by basically disaggregating those indirect cost pools and tracing and assigning them on a cause and effect relationship. Another force is poor customer value management. Customers are the source of value creation for owners or shareholders in publicly held companies. And And you've got high maintenance customers and low maintenance customers. High maintenance customers are really difficult, always changing schedule and calling your help desk and so forth. So what's really necessary is to really understand profitability by each customer. And that means the CFO and the accountants have to not only measure the product and service line costs, but go below the product gross profit margin line. I'm talking income statement, profit and loss statements, and include, selling, marketing expenses, channel distribution expenses, cost to serve of customers to get a profit and loss statement by each customer. And it's always shocking because with this greater accuracy, companies will discover, wow, we thought our largest customer was the most profitable. They're not. They may even be unprofitable because they're so diminished. Another issue is budgeting. Oh, man. The budgeting process, everybody jokes about it. It's out of date a couple of months after it's published, kind of capes into the loudest voice and strongest muscle. The veteran, managers know to pad the budget. I think the budget is so broken, the best thing to do is stop budgeting. But then that begs the question, what was the purpose of a budget in the first place? And then we can basically replace it with what's really called driver-based planning and budgeting, and moving to rolling financial forecast, refreshing the plan, if you will, every quarter, maybe even monthly, bring in the forecast and use some of the cost consumption rates, if you will. This is kind of industrial engineering 101. I think it was my freshman year, second semester, 1968 in Cornell. Volume and mix times unit level consumption rates equals capacity required, number of employees, types of employees, what to spend with suppliers. Another issue is the supply chain. The problem there is most customers view their suppliers as the enemy. They're the bad guys. So let's see if we can pound on them, negotiate lower prices. If we negotiate so much lower prices, we put them out of business. So what? We can get another supplier. That's got to stop. It needs to be a marriage. The trading partners along the supply chain need to basically collaborate and work together, because supply chains are competing against other supply chains for a share of wallet or share of purse of the customer. So they need to look for mutually beneficial changes that will benefit both of them. And then I think of another final force is the basically challenge or question about the return on investment from large ERP, enterprise resource planning systems, or large customer relationship management systems. And the issue there is, if you ask a chief information officer or IT director of a company that just spent a couple of years implementing a large ERP system, and I'm not going to name the vendor names, everyone's familiar with them, and you ask them, how well do you think the return on investment from all the work you've done met or exceeded what the software salesperson sold you on 2 years ago? Many of the chief information officers are going to say, I'm not so sure. We put in a lot of work. I haven't seen the payback. That does not mean you shouldn't implement it. You have to implement them to stay competitive. But the issue is ERP systems produce a lot of data, but not necessarily the information. You have to convert transactional data, payroll systems, purchasing systems into information. And what these enterprise performance management methods do, and I've sort of already mentioned them: strategy map with balanced scorecard, profitability reporting with using activity-based costing, driver-based rolling financial forecast, enterprise risk management, lean management, Six Sigma, all these moving parts. When you implement them, it releases the ROI like seeds from the ground, and that produces the ROI. So that was a long journey there, but that really kind of gives the overview of how all of these moving parts fit together.
All right. So I believe that this being a very dynamic function and a lot of integration that being required at every stage, right? As well as when we talk about tell me one thing, Gary. Should it be a top-down approach, or it's a bottom-top approach, or it should be a mix of the top and bottom?
Oh, it should be a mix. I mean, the top really starts with the executive team and leadership. And so they basically have to, if you will, communicate strategy to the employees in a way they can understand it. And that's where strategy map is pretty good, But from the bottom up, the managers and employee teams and individual employees, they need to trust, their executives and, basically follow them, not basically, kind of like go their own way, Let me just make a real quick point. I think in the past, the best executives and the best leaders had the best answers. Today, I do not think that is the case. Today, I think the best executives and best leaders have the best questions because there's too much complexity. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much volatility. Look at the COVID, what's going on today. For executives to rely on their sixth sense or so-called gut feel, or based on flawed and misleading information, or rely on the types of answers they made in the past that got them, voted to the top. They need to create a culture of discovery and investigation using analytics, statistics, operations research, and the like, and also tolerance for making mistakes as long as you learn from the mistakes. So that's basically top down, bottom up. It works both directions.
Okay. So can you share with us, do you have any role models or professionally you being influenced by someone, and who is your role model? Like how you started and got into this segment of the particular domain?
Well, I was very fortunate to have a mentor in my life. His name was Bob Bonsack. Sadly, he passed away over 10 years ago. He was the partner at Deloitte who hired me. And, in the evening on client engagements in the hotel room, he would actually spend time teaching me and all of the books that I've written. And they're on my website. This third page is the memorial page. They're all to Bob. In the United States, I've always liked Mark Twain. Mark Twain, was a writer who cared about the common man. You can probably tell my parents had a little grocery store, delicatessen. I was not raised, wealthy, working family. My mom and dad said it's all about customers. And I now look at that, it's all about line managers, serve the line managers. I also love composers, Beethoven, Mendelssohn. And I know in India, you've got Bollywood with wonderful music there too. But what's amazing is those composers from their brain can put notes, on a page and you make music out of it. So those are the heroes of me.
Do you have any choice of the hero here in India, in Bollywood? Any hero that...
Well, I've mentioned to you, I'll mention to the audience, I've now been to India, I think 4 times in my career, and sometimes for 2 weeks. I've been to Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, of course, Mumbai, Delhi. I've been to all of the, the outsourcing, organizations. I gave lectures because I was involved and still am involved with the Institute of Management Accountants. And then I also just did a webinar for the ISMA, that's the Institute of Society of Management Accountants. If you go to the ISMA website, on May 2nd, I did a webinar, longer than this webinar, with PowerPoint slides. So, you have to say Gandhi has got to be a hero for, one to respect in it. Right. I love India, and I love the India food, not too spicy, but good enough.
So as a word of wisdom for the younger professionals, like university students who wish to join and go into a career of EPM and CPM, so what is your advice to them?
Well, if you're young students just coming out of the university, my advice is, basically keep learning. Never stop learning. Learn how to network, communicate with others. And it's okay to be an achiever. Don't be shy. It's okay to achieve. Once you're actually now working for an employer, let's say your 3rd or 4th year, start building your resume. In other words, see whether you can get maybe transferred from one department to another department, because it's really important to eventually spend time not only maybe in accounting, but then maybe marketing, then maybe sales, maybe production operations. So, build your resume. As you get a few years more in, 5 or 6 or 7th year in, start learning how to ask questions. You may be proud of yourself and, gee, I'm really a good manager and I'm better than these others, but put your ego aside. Don't be bragging and boasting. Most people will judge you not by how much you know and how much you describe, but the quality of the questions you ask. And as you ask good questions, really pointed questions, you can actually navigate them in the direction of what you want. Start, make them feel a little uncomfortable. Ask questions like, does everybody understand the strategy? No. Are we measuring the right things? No. Are our costs accurate? No. Do we know which customers are more attractive to retain, to grow, win back, acquire, which types are not? No. Well, those questions is how you're going to actually create some discomfort in the people you're talking to. And they're going to say, well, how would we do that? Well, now you can start showing off your skills. That's my advice.
Right.
Gary, a last point that we want to understand. Do you think managers still need to improve their skills and behavioral position?
Well, yes, the managers all need to, it's a continuous learning, but I want to move on to something we talked about before we did the webinar. And I think it's the obstacles and barriers that are slowing the adoption rate of these various methods. And there's sort of 3 levels. One of them is IT related, dirty data, low quality data, or maybe disparate computer hardware. So people have got Dell equipment, IBM equipment, Hewlett-Packard equipment, but the IT can solve that. They know they've got techniques like to clean the data, extraction, transform, and load. ETL can do that. Another obstacle is a perception that it is really too complex and too complicated to implement these methods. And I don't have time to go into it now, but if you do go to my website, I have for many years been helping consulting firms how to implement these methods in a few days or just a few weeks. It's called rapid prototyping with iterative remodeling. It's basically starting with a workshop with 5 or 6 people in a room, building a very fast, high-level model, not for the purpose of use for accurate information, but so that you can bring in the managers and line and executives the afternoon after you've done it. Let them see it. Very engaging. It's their own company. Light bulbs go on. Oh, that's how it works. That's how we could basically see all these things. And then you do a few iterations. It doesn't take 6 months to a year to implement ABC. So this perception, that's another issue. But the real obstacle, Manish and Samir and the audience, has nothing to do with technology or software. It's all people. It has to do with resistance to change, for example, and that's human nature. People love the status quo. Only babies like, change of their diapers. Another issue is fear of being measured or fear of being held accountable, or fear of others knowing the truth. Sometimes a department, like a sales department or product line doesn't want other people to know that their product they're selling is really less profitable when everybody thinks it's more profitable. Another one is weak leadership. There, I said it. Maybe not all the executives, have all the answers. So, what this means is the big obstacle is really requires change management, behavioral change management, and regrettably, almost everybody that's listening to me, you don't have degrees in sociology or psychology. You're basically bean counters. Or you're what I call you're Newtonian, like Isaac Newton, the physicist. To you, the world's a big machine. Just give me the gears, the pulleys, the levers, the dials. You've got to be a little bit like Charles Darwin, Darwinian. Sense and respond. It's about people. So that's basically my advice.
Can you tell me one thing? Like the strategies that you are talking about may be very useful for the companies which are matured companies, right? But there may be companies which are not so matured enough, and it may be like 4 years, 5 years down the line, they have just traveled. So as a word of caution for them, like what sort of advice you want to give, and any value addition your particular consultancy can bring in for them or not?
Well, for early startups, I actually believe that most of these methods I just described can even apply to a brand new company, even if it's only got 5 or 10 employees, in the early months, of the startup. You still want to basically at least have some fundamental measures, because you want what KPIs are, key performance indicators, are really, definition is monitoring the progress towards accomplishing the strategic objective. And that's really what any organization is going to have, objectives. What's our next step? We could goals or objectives. And you want to kind of have some sort of metric, like what's our goal? Where are we today? Okay. We're at 100, but our target's 120. How are we? Are we getting from 100 to 120? Understanding your costs, knowing where you make money, where you lose money. It's needed for pricing, so that you have enough margin when you're selling your product and so forth. So Manish, you may have thought my answer was going to be a complete different one. Oh, for startups, it's a whole different thing. But I'm kind of saying, no, these enterprise and corporate performance management, and the acronym is EPM, CPM, they're universal at any stage, early stage, mature stage.
So I believe like it helps in creating the pathway for the startup and knowing like where to go about, like what are the checkpoints that we need to meet, right?
Yes.
And thanks, Gary, and it was a great talk with you, and thanks for participating in the very first edition of Alpha Spark. And everybody, we as well as the audience, have benefited from your talk, and thanks and all the best wishes to you.
You're welcome, but I want to make one last point, and it'll just be very brief, and it has to do with India. India, the accounting profession, really has to basically get into the 21st century. The dominance of external reporting in India for statutory reporting to government regulators is so dominant that the accountants either do not have the time or are not making the time to do the internal management accounting, and there'll be different numbers. So that's good luck to everybody. I welcome communicating.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
So much, Gary, for giving us so much in-depth understanding, which can help the companies to improve their performance and workflow bottlenecks.
My pleasure.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.